Okay, we are live. We have the Rebel Esquire, Jen Lee, a friend of mine for many years. This is our first time going live together. This is actually, it turns out Jen's a veteran. I invited her to, we're using Restream currently, and Jen already had a login. She knew the ropes. She's like adding her channels and connecting to her platforms as well. But here we are. We have a fascinating conversation today. The format for these has been these are just supposed to be organic conversations between experts in the industry. And I know, Jen, you are an attorney, so I know you can't label
I
yourself as an
am.
expert, but I can.
Yeah. Yes.
So all you have to do is just sit there and nod, right? Is that
I mean, I'm really good at that. So if you want to just keep doing that part, I'm really good with my coffee nodding. So
Yeah. Speaking of
yeah, no.
coffee, Jen, for any coffee aficionados out there, Jen just informed. I've never been a coffee person, more of a hot chocolate guy. But Jen informed me that Panera has a membership in which you can pay a nominal fee for unlimited coffee. This is crazy to
Yep.
me.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a year. I think like at least 5 years, but it's like $109 a year, I think. And then sometimes you can get a deal on it. And it's unlimited coffee. It does have like a 2 hour reset on it. So if you go in and pick up coffee, it's got a 2 hour reset to go back. But I mean, I live 5 minutes from Panera, so it's not hard to
Okay.
drive by. Yeah.
Before we get into the topic of conversation, you got to let us know, what is your all-time record for number of coffee trips per day in one given day? How many have you
So,
done? Let us know.
so I have this funny story where like, last year I was driving. I live in North Dakota, and so I work all over the country, but I live in North Dakota. And there are 4 Paneras in North Dakota, and I've actually hit all four in 2 days, and they're about 3 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours, and 2 hours apart. Like it's a big square. So I have hit all of them in a couple days. So
It's okay. Your secret
yeah,
is safe with me and the
and the
hundreds
hole
of
in
people
it.
who are, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was speaking that into existence. There might be
Mhm.
five on this stream, but maybe
Mhm.
we'll get there one day.
Someday.
So,
Yeah.
so Jen, just to sort of provide some bona fides. So I'm Jay McAllister, as many of you may know. I run Paragon Tech. We are a legal tech consultancy, enabling lawyers and attorneys to get the most out of their technology. Just, I've always been a natural born skeptic, and that tends to be very compatible with the way
With
lawyers
lawyers.
function.
Yeah.
So, we can
Yes.
create
Yes.
some measurable results, and I'm always looking for the angle, but also the disadvantages. Now, on
Yeah.
Jen's side, Jen is the Rebel Esquire, is her branding. I think. Do you have that trademarked?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. See, I figured that would be the case. I've known Jen for many years. She's actually one of the sort of original founding members of MPAC, the Managing Partner Advisors Community. This is a community of legal adjacent professionals. We all focus on solving issues for law firms from our various vistas and professional areas of expertise. Jen is a practicing attorney herself. She also helps attorneys set up their own bankruptcy practices. She also has a series of online courses on promoting firms to use better practices and strategy, as well as operational components to create efficiency within their law firm. So there's really not much that Jen does not do. Did I? But I'm sure I probably missed something in there. Fill us in on
No, no,
what else
and
would I
a
miss
lot of
there?
it is a lot of it's just thinking outside the box. That's what I tell lawyers. It's like if you're willing to think outside the box, I can help you figure it out with tech, automation, systems, mindset, whatever that happens to be. It just is different for everyone. So yeah.
So what I'd like, so we have a topic for today, which is we're going to talk about the difference between traditional automation and generative AI. There is a distinction between the two. It might be fuzzy, but we're going to attempt to provide a little bit of clarity around this topic and talk about the implications on the legal profession and how lawyers and law firms can use these technologies in order to move their practice forward in a meaningful way. Yesterday I had a live stream with Shaughnessy Dyer over at Spellbook, which is an AI, point
That.
solution for law firms. It helps them to draft and analyze contracts. We had an interesting discussion, but I'd like to know, from the practitioner standpoint, you, Jen, as well as helping your clients and advising them on strategy and how to increase the performance of their firm. I think this could be an interesting conversation. And Jen was gracious enough to provide her time so we could discuss these. And ultimately, I think we have the backs of we have the legal profession on our shoulders today. So we were going to attempt to move it forward in a meaningful way. So let's first break it down. Jen laughed at that, but
You know, there's so many things in the legal profession that we could break and it would be better. So,
So yeah, so rather than solving all of the legal profession's problems, we're gonna pick this one, and we're gonna attempt to move it forward in a measurable way today. So let's start off by just defining the difference as, and we can both respond if you think
yeah.
there's any flaws in my definition. But I'm going to take a crack on of explaining the difference on how we look at traditional automation versus AI in a legal context. So
Mhm.
traditional automation, this is logic based, sort of if then trigger based automation. So this has been around really since the dawn of really the computer, the transistor being, the core principle being you have a one or a zero, you add a bunch of those up together and you can do some interesting things. So on a base level, traditional automation lets us take a sort of a defining trigger or an initial condition, and based on that condition occurring, we can then cause other actions to happen. So you may be familiar with using platforms like Zapier or Make, right? So these are traditional automation platforms that can just trigger things to happen as a result of one action. And then there's many other platforms, such as case management systems, CRMs, document management systems that have their own built-in automation engines. But essentially the difference being you have to have sort of that initial trigger and then it causes an action to happen. Now, generative AI is on the other side of the spectrum, equally useful, but for different purposes. Generative AI is able to reason. It's able to take sort of an initial prompt or question or trigger event, and it's able to determine what actions need to be taken next and to reason its way through ultimately creating an output. Now, the way generative AI works, and this is pretty much across the board, is that these platforms are stochastic versus deterministic, meaning that that same initial input could result in a slightly different output each time you run it, right? So, and that's because the whole point that it can reason. So it's sort of using its own best judgment to determine what comes next, right? So they have different use cases, but ultimately you have these two competing technologies and can be applied to different problems within your law practice. So I don't know. From your perspective, Jen, how'd I do on breaking it down?
As I kick my computer, you did a great job because I think people use the two or they think they're the same thing a lot of times. They're like, oh, I'm not using AI in my firm. I'm not. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But are you at least automating things? So I think you did a good job of breaking down like the technical side of it. Is the automations have been around for years. That's not anything new. It's if you had word perfect in your stupid fields that they're merge fields in word perfect, that was an automation that was built in. So um, but I think people really do confuse them a lot, and they think that AI means it's all scary and it's all thinking for itself. When really automations are you telling it what to do. So
Do you tend to find yourself gravitating towards one or the other, either in your own practice or when you're advising your clients? Do you tend to have a does one tend to be a better fit?
I tend to see what they need. A lot of them need the basic automations. That's the sad part, is a lot of them are still doing things like really manually, and so the automations help. And it depends on what tools are out there from a Gen AI perspective. If it's something that's tried and tested, like you had Shaughnessy from Spellbook yesterday, um, something like that versus a brand new tech is scarier for lawyers. Gen AI has more opportunity in it. There's more time savingness for some things. So it depends on what they're willing to look at. But I start with automations because that's easier for me to explain and easier for them to get on board with. So
Yeah, so when it comes to automations, I think many folks, especially now when there's so much hype around generative AI, I mean, it's sort of the new kid on the block, ever
yeah.
since 2022 when ChatGPT and Spellbook and a lot of these early entrants into the generative AI space released. I think people were allured with the possibilities of what could be done with these platforms, right? And they almost seem to have forgotten about the potential impact that simple automation can have.
Mhm.
For me, I found that, like, I was just trying to think. I asked you the question, so it'd only be fair for me to ask myself the question: is like, do I tend to 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 sort of do I gravitate towards traditional automation or AI? And I think it's very dependent on the client's needs as well as their sophistication, right? Like in how they operate, the practice area, the types of matters that they handle, their billing model, whether they're flat fee, contingent,
Yep.
value based, subscription. Like there's so many models, and I think very all of these sort of nuances in how your firm operates will ultimately dictate which tool may be the most effective for you.
Mhm.
But like oftentimes what I'm seeing is that lawyers tend to implement these tools in a way that may not necessarily be from a strategy first perspective. And I'll explain what I mean by that. There tends to be, so like, for example, I had a client who they were ultimately looking to draft, was it they were looking to draft engagement letters for their firm, and they were looking to utilize they built an entire custom GPT that would
Mhm.
allow them to take all the inputs known about the client from their case management system. So, the contact information, the pronouns, the type of matter that was in question, the sort of material facts, the base facts of that matter. They were taking that information and then plugging that into a custom GPT that they built to draft their engagement letter. When we came into the firm and we started identifying how the firm operates and looking for any sources of dysfunction, that immediately became one of the things that we honed in on. And we started to ask
Mhm.
the firm about their process for, what ultimately was the catalyst for deciding to use this tool. And once we had sort of defined how they needed to operate, it was actually much better served by their case management tool actually had a built-in
Yeah.
document automation engine, which is using, more just it's traditional automation. It's just taking those fields that are already input into the practice management system and then populating an engagement letter. Like
Yep.
the core structure of the engagement letter didn't need to change much. It didn't need to be generated but differently. It did not need to be generated in a bespoke manner each time. It just needed to have these couple fields changed, and again, you make the changes that needed to the pronouns and things like that, and you're ready to go. So oftentimes firms can get allured by the
Yes.
possibilities of what's available with Gen AI, and they can sort of miss these easy wins and create additional complexity that actually makes the firm operate in a more clunky way than it needs to.
So I have a question for you then, because you see this with your clients, and I have a feeling I know the answer, but it's fun to talk to a tech person because I get to be nerdy all day. Um, do you find that most law firms aren't even using their case management system, like 50% of what it actually does? Like they don't know what it actually does.
So, two-part question. Part one is that I'm buzzing with excitement because you're the first person who's ever said, I'm excited to talk with a text person. So I'm going to hold on to that to the end of the week. That'll get me through the week. When it
Okay.
when it when it comes to usage of their case management system, I wouldn't even limit it to that. I think most law firms have a severely diminished usage of the platforms
Mhm.
that they use for their
Yeah.
firm. I would say it's under 20% usage. Like, I'm not making the argument that every firm needs to use 100% of the capabilities, let's say, for
Yeah.
example, in their case
Exactly. Yeah.
management system, right? Because
Yeah.
there's some features that don't necessarily pertain to that firm, right? Like, I know Clio just dropped a big release. Sort of, you can finance the payments on your bill to your client, so they have the ability to pay in
Yep.
installments, essentially, right?
Yep. Yep.
Like for some firms that doesn't have a material, like for a contingency based firm, they don't need that feature. So I'm not arguing that you need 100% of the features to be used, but I am arguing that you should take a strategic look at the way that your firm needs to function and then pair that with the specific functionalities of the tool to get
Yeah.
much better usage out of it. I mean, you're paying for 100% of the features, so you might as well use the ones that are actually going to move the needle for your firm.
Yeah. But what I often find is they think they need something. And then when we look into what their case management system is, it already does that. They just didn't know how to use it or it wasn't set up correctly. So,
Right. Yeah. So what I'd like to know from you, Jen, and I know that this is something that, well, let me just ask you, and you can tell me how it works out for you. Do you tend to have your favorite use cases for automation, or like if you can think of the most salient automation use cases that you've implemented or advised your clients on lately, or even for yourself, what do those tend to be?
a lot of it has to do with document automation and task automation. So I use So I like to be very open-minded to what the client already has paid for or what they're already paying for and try to work those things together. But I find that even like this, some small firms, medium firms, they'll have like 10 partners sometimes, and they have no case management system. And so, or they don't have a document management system. So my use cases tend to be figuring out exactly what they currently have, and then how can we get that so that we like everything is uniform, documents, clients are taken care of. I love automations for client communication because that's the number one reason next to IOLTA accounts that people get bar complaints is for communication. And it's really easy to set up automations that say, hey, something's triggered. An email goes out. For example, this happens in bankruptcy a lot. Someone will file a motion for relief from the automatic stay, which usually means your lender wants to repossess your car or your mortgage, your house. And clients get that in the mail and they freak out because it sounds really harsh, like we're going to come sell your house or your car. And if the lawyer just sent a quick email that said this was filed, it's standard, or we're dealing with it already, they could have headed off like 10 hours of frantic texting at 2 a.m. or whatever, because we don't communicate. We think, oh, it's routine, it's regular, I don't need to do anything with this, and the clients don't see it like that. So that client automation is one of my favorite things to do.
Mm. Yeah, and those are sort of some of those low hanging fruit. I
Yeah.
love the fact that you're looking at it from the perspective of, and this is what I advise all of my clients: when you're looking at AI or automation, you should only implement these platforms if it has a net benefit for the firm and making the workday of your staff more efficient or more pleasant, or if it creates a positive impact for your clients. It
Yep.
creates a better client experience, because ultimately, we've all had those clients that we've really knocked it out of the park with, and then we go back and we try to reconstruct, like, what did we do? And like ultimately the whole point of automation or AI and technology in general is you're trying to create a choreographed experience for your client so that each engagement goes exactly like that best engagement.
Yep.
So I
Yep.
love that you
Exactly.
think of it from that perspective of how do I enhance the client and those simple communication updates. Like
Yeah.
I'm the co-chair of the legal technology committee for the CBA, the Chicago Bar Association. And we just
Mhm.
had Rory Quinn on earlier this month. He's the litigation counsel for the ARDC. So he's our regulatory disciplinary body.
Okay. Mhm.
And like that was one of the things he mentioned. He's like, lack of communication is one of the main sources of complaints, and issues with client funds, right? Like you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
IOTA. And so that, like,
Yeah.
if you can sort of head off those issues by just being more efficient and being proactive in the way that you communicate with clients, that can make a big impact. Now, let me
Yeah.
ask you this, Jen, because I understand from, like, I'm a big fan of automated communications. I understand when it comes to attorneys, they tend to be fairly risk averse. And like, I don't want anything being sent out to my client without me knowing or being in the loop. So, is there a way that you found that automation can be leveraged where either there's like predefined language that's already set up in advance that goes out that the managing partner or the whoever oversees the communications of the firm has already agreed upon, or do you believe that it's simply more effective to have each individual communication be reviewed before it gets sent out? What do you
No,
think?
I
And then what
do.
do
I
you
do a
see?
lot of predetermined stuff. Like we have template emails, like for things like that I was just talking about. It's pretty standard to look at it. And usually there's a paralegal maybe involved if there's something that's maybe out of the ordinary. But what we're trying to automate is those things that are ordinary so that you can focus on the out of ordinary stuff.
Mm,
And so I highly recommend templates. I know some attorneys don't like if it looks like a robot or an AI, like it looks like a robot wrote it. So we write them in the style of the firm, and it doesn't sound like AI. It sounds like someone reached out and sent an email about it. So I think the two hesitancies I get most often with attorneys are what you said with, do I have to review everything? And you do, but if you're reviewing, predetermined language, that's what's going out. And then is it going to sound like a robot wrote it?
hmm.
Yeah. But I
Okay.
mean, you have to convince lawyers at some point to automate. And even if they're reviewing, you're drafting a whole bunch of emails and they're sitting in their outbox and they review them, that's saving a lot of time versus them having to go into each file, review it, draft it. and send it. So even if they're total, I have to review everything, you can create that automation where it's in their drafts folder and they can review it. So
Right. So I mean, so you heard it. I mean, this is one of the things that we try. I'm a legal tech consultant, so I'm always looking at things. I realize I have a biased viewpoint. I'm always looking at things from the standpoint solely of efficiency and best use of technology. But there's also, you have to meld that with knowledge of sort of, legal operations, psychology of lawyers as well as their clients, how
mhm.
different things are going to resonate. So I mean, you've heard it. This is, Jen, you've been successfully implementing these automations, and it's not as scary as you think. If you do this in the correct way and you determine what that predefined language is, you can drastically decrease the number of calls that you're fielding. I know Clio's
Mhm.
legal trends report for 2025, there was some huge number associated. I think there was like 2 to 3 hours per week of attorney time that was being lost just due to task switching, or I
Yep.
should say context switching. So like if
Yep.
you're working on a matter or drafting an email, client calls, you jump on the phone, like it takes you 15 minutes at least to get back in the zone after you've taken that call. So you get to the end of the week and it's, you could easily see how those 2 to 3 hours could be lost. So let me ask you this, Jen, and we're almost at the end of our time here, folks. So we're going to have to wrap after this. But if you like the conversation, maybe we'll do another one. But let me ask you this, Jen. I think the points you're making are all valid relating to automation and the communication cadences. But I think, from my perspective, and I want to know your thoughts on this, firms need to first have a strategy. They need to first have a defined cadence or a defined system or process involved in moving their cases forward. Like I've always been of the belief that it's impossible, it's difficult if not impossible to automate if you don't know all of the steps involved. Like for example, how can you set up those automated triggers if you
Yep.
don't even know
Yep.
what phases your matters typically go through? Now, I find a lot of pushback from some of my clients, especially the ones who do, very, big brain lawyer practice areas where it's like, we can't, there are no similarities in matter types. This is all very bespoke. It has to be done, every case is different. So I get a lot of pushback on, okay, can we even decide on what those similar components are and those phases? So what is your, given your experience and your knowledge on how this stuff works, what's your stance on,
Well,
finding
that's
those similarities and
yeah.
automating?
Yeah, well, that's a little bit of BS, I think, that they don't have a standard. So my stance is yes, you have to know what your workflows are, and you can't just take. And I have a whole webinar that I did on workflows on this because you can't just take your current paper practice and put it into a technology. Like you can't take the exact
Mm,
same thing. You have to rethink it and think what makes the most sense for the client and for us, and that takes time and effort. And what I find the most pushback on is they don't want to take the time. They're like, oh, I don't have 20 hours to set aside to do this. And I'm like, so you're going to lose 1,000 hours this year because you won't invest 20 hours of time and money to outline it. And that would save you 1,000 hours. Now, if you're billing by the hour, whole other story, then we have to talk about like how to make up that different money. But yeah, that's the biggest problem. You have to have strategy before you do this. And lawyers have shiny object syndrome just like everybody else. They want to go adopt new tech sometimes. And then they get mad because it doesn't work because they didn't think about how to implement. They just bought whatever software it was. And now they have 2,000 subscriptions and they don't know what to do with all of them. So, yeah.
so so let me ask you this. What are it sounds like your sense of direction and not falling for the shiny object syndrome would sort of be your takeaway. Would you say that's a fair?
I would say, yeah, it's my takeaway is you have to have a strategy for automation and AI and workflows. It can't be just we're going to buy a platform and it's going to work from day one. And use those experts out there, use consultants, use people who do this for a living instead of trying to DIY everything and then getting mad that it doesn't work.
Well said.
That's my
Yeah,
takeaway.
I'm so glad we're at a consensus here, because I was going to say, like, my takeaway would be really when it comes to technology specifically, and especially nowadays in the age of AI, improvement and success stems from intention rather than imitation. So don't
Yep,
try and copy
exactly.
other firms. Don't try and keep up with the Joneses. You really need to have a well-defined strategy to move your firm forward. So
Mhm.
All right,
Yep.
that'll do it for today, folks. We are a couple minutes over, but hopefully enjoyed the conversation. This was awesome for me. I enjoyed it. Obviously, Jen Lee, make sure to go follow her on LinkedIn. I think Jen, you also have a YouTube channel as well. Can you
I
let the
do.
people know what
Rebel
you do?
Esquire. Yep. Rebel Esquire is my YouTube channel.
So make sure to go
Yeah.
follow Jen, give her page some love. And then, of course, if you're not following me on LinkedIn, Jay McAllister on LinkedIn, and you can go to our YouTube page, Paragon Tech, where we have a huge library of content, huge and growing, all related to legal software reviews, tutorials, and information about running a better law practice using technology. So that's it for today,
Okay.
folks. We will see you on the next one.